Channeled message.
Soft-spoken does not mean soft. Detached does not mean heartless. Peaceful does not mean passive. And being spiritually evolved does not require you to amputate every part of yourself that makes other people uncomfortable. There's a difference between becoming lighter and becoming less whole. A lot of people spend years trying to heal by editing themselves down to whatever sounds the most spiritually acceptable. They want to be endlessly forgiving, endlessly understanding, endlessly calm, endlessly available. No anger, no edge, no suspicion, no confrontation, no darkness, nothing that could possibly make somebody say, "You ain't healed." That is not integration. That is another performance. Real shadow work does not turn you into a person without shadows. All right? It teaches you how to stop being unconsciously controlled by them. Your anger still exists. Now it has intelligence. Your detachment still exists. Now it has discernment. Your capacity for aggression still exists. Now it has discipline, right? Your sensitivity remains. It simply no longer requires self-abandonment. You did not become harmless. You became conscious. That is a very, very, very different thing. There may have been a version of you who believed goodness meant constantly proving that you were safe for everyone else. You softened your boundaries, explained your no, gave people additional opportunities because you did not want to appear unforgiving. You suppressed anger because anger did not match the spiritual identity you were trying to maintain. You kept bringing light into rooms where somebody was repeatedly demonstrating that what they actually needed was a locked door. Eventually, maturity teaches you that light without discernment can become exposure. You do not have to illuminate every room. You need to know which rooms deserve your presence. There is power in understanding your own darkness without becoming ashamed of it. The shadow contains things that were pushed underneath because they were inconvenient to somebody else. Hear me. Your anger at being violated, your instinct to protect yourself, your ability to recognize hostility, your ambition, your sexuality, your refusal, your capacity to walk away without explaining yourself 15 times. None of those qualities automatically make you dark in the destructive sense. Sometimes what you call darkness was simply power you had not learned how to hold yet, responsibly anyway. That is integration. You stop splitting yourself into the acceptable version and the version you hide. Psychologically, splitting creates extremes. Either you are compassionate or you are cold. Either you forgive or you are bitter. Either you love someone or you completely dehumanize them. Extremes. Hear me? Either you are spiritual or you acknowledge that sometimes you are fucking angry. Integration gives you range. You can understand why somebody became who they are and still decide you want nothing to do with them. You can forgive someone spiritually and never trust them practically. You can wish somebody well and refuse another conversation. Good riddance, good day, right? You can love humanity and dislike a particular human being's conduct. You can have empathy without volunteering to become somebody else's emotional landfill. Two things can exist at once. That is emotional maturity. And detachment becomes different once you understand that. Healthy detachment is not emotional anesthesia. You still feel. You simply stop allowing every feeling to issue commands. You can miss somebody without contacting them. You can feel compassion without reopening the relationship. You can remember something beautiful without pretending the entire experience was beautiful. You can experience sadness and still know the decision was correct. The heart gets to have feelings. The mind still gets to vote. The spirit still gets discernment. That is balance. The same applies to being soft-spoken. Some of the strongest people in the room have stopped needing volume to establish authority. You can speak quietly and mean every word. You can say no without a speech. You can leave without slamming the door. You can correct somebody without losing control of yourself. You can recognize disrespect without becoming disrespectful in return. It is not a weakness. That is what we would call containment, right? Anyone can release emotion. Anyone. Raise your hand if you were a crash out. All right. Now raise your hand if you still are a crash out. Okay. Did you retire from being a crash out? Me neither. Right. So containment. Anyone can release emotion. It takes discipline to decide what your emotion is allowed to become. That is where your shadow becomes useful. You know exactly. Oh, my word. You know exactly what you are capable of when pushed far enough. You simply don't wish to demonstrate it. You don't need to demonstrate it, right? There is tremendous power in being aware of your teeth without needing to bite everybody who irritates you, right? You stop confusing restraint with inability. That is one of the gifts of integration. You do not fear the darker parts of yourself anymore because they are no longer operating behind your back. You know when jealousy appears. You know when resentment appears. You know when anger appears. You know when your ego wants retaliation. You can sit with those parts long enough to understand what they are communicating without handing them the steering wheel. The shadow becomes information rather than command. That is why repressing darkness can actually make it more dangerous. Repressing darkness can make it more dangerous. Anything you refuse to acknowledge has more opportunity to operate unconsciously. The person who insists, I'm never angry, may be expressing anger through passive aggression. The person who insists they have no ego may be building an entire identity around being more spiritually evolved than everyone else. The person who says they forgive everything may actually be storing resentment underneath compulsive kindness. Whatever is denied does not disappear. It just changes clothes, right? Integration removes the costume. You can say, yes, this hurt me. Yes, I'm angry. Yes, I recognize that I could do what I could do from anger. And no, I'm not going to give anger authority over my character because Bill in jail is not cool. All right. That is power. That is power, yo. Spiritually, God does not require you to become less human in order to become more conscious. Discernment requires contrast. You understand peace partially because you have experienced chaos. You understand integrity because you have encountered deception. You understand what healthy love feels like partly because you learn what love should never require. Even darkness can become instructive when you stop worshiping it and stop fearing it. There are things that develop underground, roots, seeds, the unseen architecture that eventually supports what grows towards light. Remember, darkness is not automatically evil. Sometimes darkness is where integration happens. It is where you meet the parts of yourself that cannot be understood under the performance of constant positivity. What? You sit with what embarrasses you, what frightens you, what enrages you, what you secretly want, what you secretly fear. And instead of judging those parts into silence, you bring consciousness to them. Light does not destroy the shadow. That's not how that works. It allows you to see what was inside it. That is why spiritual balance is not 50% good and 50% evil. It is consciousness strong enough to hold complexity without surrendering to either extreme. You know you have the capacity to destroy and choose creation. You know you could retaliate and choose consequence instead. You can become emotionally cold and choose selective warmth, right? You know, you can become consumed by other people's darkness and choose to remain rooted in your own light. Choice is what makes integration powerful. You are not good because you are incapable of doing anything else. You are good because you have met enough of yourself to know there are other options, and you keep choosing what aligns with who you intend to become. That kind of goodness has weight. It has been tested. This version of you may confuse people. You are kind, but you are no longer easy to manipulate. Compassionate, but not endlessly available. Spiritual, but not gullible. Detached, but not emotionally dead. Capable of loving deeply, truly, right? Without believing love requires indefinite tolerance. You can sit in the light without pretending you have never walked through darkness. You can enter darkness without forgetting where the light is. That is integration, yo. And integration changes the way you move through relationships. You no longer need someone else to be completely evil before you are allowed to leave. They can have beautiful qualities and still be wrong for your life. They can have trauma and still be accountable. They can love you in whatever capacity they possess and still be incapable of loving you in a way that you are willing to live with, right? You don't need to flatten people into villains to justify protecting yourself. That's another sign of maturity. You can see the whole person and still make the decision. That is detachment without heartlessness. You don't have to hate somebody to know you are finished. You don't have to destroy their humanity to preserve your own. And you do not have to return simply because you no longer feel angry. Sometimes peace is the final confirmation that the ending was correct. You're no longer fighting the person. You are no longer fighting yourself. You simply know where you stand. That is where balance starts feeling less dramatic. There is no need to announce how powerful you are. You know. No need to prove how healed you are. You live it. No need to perform softness so nobody becomes intimidated by your boundaries. People can interpret you however they need to, right? Some people with no boundaries are offended by your boundaries. You have become responsible for something more important than being universally understood. You are responsible for remaining internally aligned. Your light has depth now. Your darkness has consciousness. Your softness has boundaries. Your detachment still has a heart. Your power no longer needs chaos to prove that it exists. That is what integration looks like. You did not heal into one side of yourself. You became large enough to contain all of yourself without allowing every part to run the show. Soft-spoken, but not soft. Detached, but never heartless. Light and shadow no longer fighting for ownership. Both recognized, both understood, both under conscious direction. That is balance. And once you reach that kind of balance, you stop asking which side of yourself you are supposed to become. You understand that wholeness was always the assignment.
End of message.